If I take this year's Human Development Report 21-2022, and if I look into 1990 Human Development Report data, I can definitely say Nepal has improved, has been improving, and like 90% of the countries in the world that we can observe since 2019, a bit of a red flag saying that something is happening. And that's not only for Nepal. So we have slight bumpy road, 2019, 2020, 2021, 22, which I think we need to take into consideration when we are doing policy orientations, investments, and planning, budgeting types of work that we do in development. But overall, Nepal is improving and has been improving. So we should not just rest on achievements that we made over the last 30 plus years. I'm here framing it to the human development. As you know, most probably, I take it that you had read the reports. For the last 32 years, since the first report, Human Development Report, as Dr. Mahabubul Haq said, it was about people. It was the centrality of the people and the real wealth of the nation being the people. And that's what basically the report is about, and giving options, choices, and capabilities, looking into this whole interrelation between people and and their environment. So if you look into the last 32 years, Human Development Report tried to put forward interactions of people with security, with democracy, with culture, with climate change, with different various aspects that interact with the human nature, and to see how people's development changes with these different issues. So there is no exception this year, 2021-2022. The Human Development Report is trying to put forward the epoch in which we are living right now. We had a COVID pandemic, definitely, as you said, but we are also living conflicts and what is happening in the world, not only in Russia and Ukraine, but elsewhere in other parts of the world there are conflicts. So pandemic affected everyone equally, conflict affects inequally, and then we have obviously the planetary pressures like climate change, the pollution, and all these pressures coming together, it makes people scared. They are fear. They are not really settled because of what's happening in the world. So on one hand, we call that there are planetary pressures. We already started with unequal situations. Not everyone was equal. On top of it, there are planetary pressures. It's not only about environment and climate, it's also about conflicts. It's also about the inequalities and access to basics. So this comes together. And then there is what we call the pursuit of transformation in the society, how people are trying new ways to cope with this uncertain situation. So that's a second, I would say, a piece of what people are living and what it gives to people. They are scared, again, fear. Can we be able to find a way to cope with this planetary pressure, with this conflict, with this climate change, or with this pandemic? So that fear, trying different ways of working. So that's a second tier of uncertainty. and the third one basically being how people, I mean, that is where you need protection, right? If you have fear of kind of getting into a certain areas where you are not completely sure about what is it that you are living. And then the third one being basically what would prevent you being there? What would you basically getting getting there because of conflicts, disagreements, getting polarized societies, politically, of course, naturally, but also being disagreements in the place because of disagreement in the society, the community, the family that you live. So you're bringing three types of uncertainties. That is what the report tries to illustrate. The planetary pressures, the new ways of coping with these planetary pressures, how to try different things to ease this planetary pressure. So we call it pursuit of transition, the just transition. And the three is that what you face by doing that, the polarization, disagreement that comes with it, politically or socially, disagreements, polarizations. So these are three types of uncertainties that we call as an uncertainty complex. It's being called uncertainty complex because when you add different layers, it becomes a bit more complex than that you have to deal with only one set of complexity. If you only have to deal with conflict, then fine. But if you have to deal with the conflict, if you have to deal with also the failures to act and lose people, if you also have to deal with basically the political violence in a country or societal violence, you might be adding different layers of uncertainties, and that becomes a bit more complicated to deal with. So that's what the report is trying to put forward, and also to show that how these uncertain complexity is affecting the human development. Basically, your choices, your options for education, health, and standards of living in a country because of this uncertainty complex. This is what the report is trying to illustrate, and also trying to offer some of the solutions or policy orientations that the researchers, the authors, think that the countries could consider in proposing to their policymakers. So if you look into only one thing, let's say the GDP or the Human Development Index even, and if you're trying to basically propose policies based on Human Development Index, the GDP, or even a Human Development Report alone, it will not work. Because as we discussed, the uncertainties are complex. So you cannot really work on one line, one vertical line. You have to get the horizontal line together in order to address the complexity of the issues. So again, the same way, you cannot only depend on the government to work on human development, the institutions. You cannot depend only solely about institutions. You have to work with the government. You have to work with the politicians. Who are the politicians? They are basically people's representatives. People have voted for them. So they represent a voice of people, aspiration of people in a country, and expected to deliver on their whatever the electoral commitments are and the vision for which they have been voted for. So you have a political vision for a country. Now, a government would execute some of those policies and programs. So you need them as well. So you have a parliament, which basically the politicians would be. You have the government, which will be executing. Then you have a judiciary, which basically makes sure the regulatory functions take place. You have development partners who are basically bringing the institutions, the international solidarity for the government to deliver, but also you have people that represent through the civil society organizations, like media, like researchers, like analysts. So everyone will have to come together, graduating towards the graduation path that Nepal is, LDC country, managed to vaccinate more than 96% of its population, and almost everyone got one shot of vaccination. And this is incredible success story in Nepal, which managed from starting from, I think, less than one laboratory in 2020, early 2020, to come to a position or to a situation, a collective decision, collective effort, bringing those vaccines, the personal protective items, the oxygen. I mean, these are health investment, one of the key dimensions of human development. And Nepal managed that. We have education. We know that some 8 million kids couldn't go to school for a longer, I think more than 6, 7, 8 months, consecutive 8 months, 6 months, 7 months. You need a different, special investment in technology, in internet, access to IT infrastructure to function schools or function basic service delivery. And somehow Nepal managed to do that. And Nepal managed relief. Obviously, there were difficulties in some sectors, like migration, remittances went down, migrants returned, tourists left. They definitely, like other countries, there were different areas where we felt, and we're still feeling, the heat. But definitely you can reverse, and as I said, conscious investment, and to know where Nepal has the potential, and to draw the development partners to those potential areas consciously, and demanding those investment in a way to reduce those planetary pressures, to make sure those investments happen in places where you can really make a difference, and making sure that those insurance that Nepal government and the development partners would do consciously to protect the people who are left behind, who are not part of social safety nets, who are not part of social protection in the country. Because Nepal, 90% are in the informal sector. So if you lose a job, you don't have a safety net, you don't have a social protection system formally. Those who are in the formal sector probably have a system. So how do we make sure that insurance is there to protect people and promote the freedoms of people around? And then innovation, it's not about only technology or the IT or whatnot. It is also about the youth using their capacities and their intentions to prepare themselves to better respond to crisis, or to respond differently to a crisis, to acquire some capabilities that would help them to attack a problem differently. That is what the innovation is about. That they have that experience and responsibility to try a new way to respond to a crisis. That innovation. So if we bring these elements together, and if we give them an education that pushes them to think critically, to reason critically, and it helps them to basically recognize the freedoms, and that's what the report says once again, about the freedoms, protect individual freedoms, and giving space for people to express their voices, basically representation. So if you bring those elements and work using certain principles of flexibility, inclusion, creativity, you can still come back to the SDG path. It's possible, and I really believe it is possible. And especially in Nepal, because when Nepal decides, I think it happens. And so it's a question about using the right moment, opportunistic moment, to perhaps critically think about the development path and take and tap to every opportunity in front of you, in country, within the country, in the region, with immediate neighbors, beyond in the South Asia region, and also beyond South Asia in the global South North together, and to see what Nepal can offer while protecting its natural resources for the future. I think Nepal is uniquely positioned with federalism. I think what the path Nepal chose to go, moving from a unitary system to a federal system, breaking in the way that your service delivery is happening. So you have 761 ways, different ways, to bring those services to the people. So I think, of course, it's probably a bit complex. It needs a lot of coordination. It means a lot of collaboration. It means also a lot of challenges that would arise from coexistence of these different tiers together. But I think it's an opportunity at the same time. This is my opinion. You're very right when you say that who knows people's problems the most? Those, first of all, in the family, because you live in the family, right? Then your immediate neighbors, then your little community, then your little ward, the toll, the ward, the municipality. So you can, climb up those different tiers. And we definitely cannot forget about their role in delivering those services, basic services, when it comes to education, the health, the livelihoods for people, making them available in the immediate vicinity where people live. And we know also that Nepal is, it's not easy country. You have 8,800 plus meters to 60 meters on the ground. So its topography is vast, and people are quite scattered in different places. To bring the services to these differently located population is in itself is a challenge. So you need first people to be placed in these local governments who can deliver, who are trained officials, trained personnel, the trained service providers right in the locality. You need infrastructure, the rural infrastructure, the roads, basically the office infrastructure or IT infrastructure, or the basic infrastructure you need to reach out to those local people. So that means investment. Then you need knowledge and training of those people, because it's a new set of responsibilities. It's a new way of working, new way of discharging their responsibilities. So that requires understanding their role first, understanding their responsibilities, and then delivering it and accounting for what they are delivering. So it in itself is a huge learning enterprise. So this whole local elections that we had a few months ago has given you a new cohort of new people who are in the place, which needs orientation, understanding what is about human development, what does it mean, or SDGs, what does it mean SDGs, what does it mean Paris Accord, what does it mean carbon emission, what does it mean ambition. These terms that we use in the international development arena, it is important to be localized and understand what it means at the local level when you prepare a local plan to invest in the local community, or to plan to invest in a budget, or to negotiate when an investor comes to a local community, municipality, or a district, or a province, if you want to negotiate a foreign direct investment, the provincial authorities or the local authorities need to understand what it would mean to negotiate that, keeping in mind about the natural resources depletion or the carbon dioxide emission or the pollution that it would bring or the biodiversity loss. How do you balance this natural resources with that investment? For that, you need strong negotiators. You need to understand, and also you need to factor into your bill, basically, when you calculate what it would cost to the society, to the people who live not only today, but who are also the people of tomorrow. So that basically the sustainability element of any investment need to be understood by the provincial and local authorities. They have the skill, the knowledge, the skills, and the competencies that they need, and the freedom of action, so that they can be meaningful when they do development at the local level. And it is not enough to do it with the local people. It's not sufficient to work only with the local or the provincial authorities. The federal structure, they also have their role and their responsibility to play. This is, I think, once again comes to your previous question, that it's not only about a one government solution. Everyone brings a coordinated reflection. Everyone has ideas, great ideas. They have different ways of thinking, different ways of looking at a problem. And some of those conflicts, polarization happens, that when these ideas are not listened to or not being respected. So this is where that to disagree, it's a good thing. It's that shows there's a debate about it. Even this Human Development Report, not everyone would agree. They might have other ideas. This is one way of looking at things. There might be other ways of looking at it. But that is what we want to create, UNDP. It's to create that debate. So that debate forces people to do critical thinking. Is it good? Am I reasoning right? Are there any other ways to do the same thing? Can we learn from another country? So if you look immediately, I know when the Human Development Report comes, most of the countries, they go to the statistical annex and they look at not even their country, as we used to say in UNDP, we look at the neighbors' rank first before even our own rank, right? So this is where basically, I think what I would like to look at is that where I was in last year, where was I in 2020 or 2021, not because, that was a different group who was managing, but it was because that would be the way to show your progress by decade or by yearly or by decade, and see that what is the trend. Media should not only look at the Human Development Index and say that Nepal lost or Nepal gained. That should not be the headline, I think. I'm being really, it could go beyond. It should really go to the analytics of the report. Basically, there are three pieces in the report. You have the whole theme explained through the chapters, then you have the methodology, and then you have the statistical annexes. So I think a balanced reading of all these pieces, it would be very, very useful. And I think also if you look into like other dimensions, the gender dimension, for example, this is something sometimes we miss. We look into the overall human development progress, but we miss out how the men fare, or how the women fare compared to the men or the women, vice versa. And what is it? What does it mean in terms of reproductive health, or the empowerment, or the market access for women, gender inequality index? So if you see that, you definitely could see that certain provinces will have to do a bit more, double their efforts to bring their indicators a bit higher and to make sure that they're in the right track. Nepal has done a lot of analytics, and for example, SDG baselines. In all 7 provinces had done the SDG baselines. So you have some data over there. You have done the analytics of the SDG globe. I mean, for whole Nepal, costed analytics are there. So media could really go beyond the hour of the publication or the launching, meaning that when we do a launch that you're interested in the report, but then after, I mean, we all sometimes tempted to do that, but basically going back to previous reports and trying to kind of bring that history and reminding the general public or the policymakers, decision makers about the different commitments and different ways that countries can do, and also to do some comparisons. Similar countries, not necessarily the neighbor A, neighbor B, but also similar countries compared to Nepal. Like here, you have a good cohort of developing LDC countries. So to look at it, where can Nepal learn from other developing countries or the LDCs in terms of different dimensions, and bring those stories to the fore, and then create debate about it. Media can also train your younger journalists to human development, basically, to concepts, where it comes from and why it mattered in 1990, and what is the relevance in 2022, what has changed between 1990 and 2022, a concept and which has a certain raison d'etre at that point of time, and how it has evolved. So those are basically giving substance for journalists, for younger generation, to really do this critical thinking beyond index, and to go to the report. Make sure that it is translated into Nepali and other languages where people can access this knowledge. The university students, who are your future decision makers in the country, can read and understand, because these reports are in English. So how do we make sure this knowledge is accessible to the students? So those are simple things that media can definitely make a difference and create a debate. Go to a university, bring students to your television platforms and ask them to speak about, read about, not UNDP resident representative or others, but also to create interest and curiosity about a development issue among the students, and to make sure that debate takes place. So that's what we call the thought leadership, that's what we call the critical thinking, analytics that would definitely shape their academic path, and ultimately will get into their DNA in the way that they would be behaving in the country to make decisions.